If you ever find yourself in Cutler, Maine, don't even glance at the Cutler Memorial Library. I'm Clara Voss, 29, and I'm scribbling this in a notebook hidden under my floorboards because I might not make it through another night. 2 months ago, I took a job there thinking $22 an hour could stitch my life back together. I was so wrong. That library isn't just old, it's alive, and it's got my name carved into its walls. The fog out there doesn't just hide things, it keeps them. I was couch surfing in Portland, my bank account at $3.27, eviction notices clogging my inbox, and my last gig, barista at a grimy cafe, gone after I threw hot coffee at a drunk who grabbed me. 3 years ago, I dropped out of UMaine's English program when my dad, a Bangor fisherman, collapsed mid-haul from a heart attack, leaving me $30,000 in his debts. His tales of Maine's cursed coasts, shipwrecks, sea spirits, things that linger in the fog, echoed as I answered a sketchy ad for a night librarian in Cutler, a fishing village where the Atlantic gnaws the cliffs like teeth. The library is a Gothic monster, gray stone and gargoyles squatting on a cliff, its sign reading "Knowledge is eternal" in chipped gold. Locals call it the Widow's Watch, built in 1876 by a captain's wife who went mad waiting for his ship that never returned. My interview was with Mrs. Eldridge, a woman in her 70s with eyes like frozen tides. The air stank of damp books, wax, and a sharp, burnt salt tang. "Night shift's solitary," she said, her Maine accent slicing the silence. "Follow the rules, or you're finished." She handed me a leather-bound ledger, its pages brittle. 10 rules typed in faded ink, with red scrawls that looked like blood. I stifled a laugh, but her unblinking stare choked it. "Memorize these before your 9 p.m. shift," she said. "Break 'em, and you're on your own." I nodded, my mind on the $1,500 rent I owed. As I left, the day clerk, Amos, a grizzled fisherman with salt-crusted boots, grabbed my arm. "Read 'em thrice, lass," he whispered, eyes darting to the shadows. "She don't take kindly to strangers." I shrugged it off, but his words clung like damp fog. "Here's the rules. 1. Lock the front door at 9:05 p.m. exactly. Check it 3 times. 2. Turn on all reading lamps at shift start. Never turn them off, even if they flicker. 3. Count the reading rooms at 10 p.m., midnight, and 2 a.m. there should be 7. If there's more, return to the desk. 4. If the phone rings between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., answer on the 5th ring. Say, "Cutler Library, closed till dawn." 5. Never open the east wing door, even if it knocks. If it opens, leave the building. 6. If you hear humming in the stacks, wear the desk's earplugs till it stops. 7. If you smell seaweed, burn a paper from the desk in the brass bowl. 8. Don't look at the stained glass windows from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., no matter what. 9. If a patron comes after midnight, check their shadow. If they got none, don't let them in. 10. At 5:45 a.m., check the return chute. Burn anything, not a book, in the courtyard furnace. I memorized the rules at my friend's apartment, the ledger beside a stale coffee, Portland's fog smudging the windows. I drove to Cutler, the ocean's roar like a threat. The library loomed, its gargoyles glaring as I pulled into the gravel lot at 8:50 p.m. The reading lamps flickered when I turned them on, casting jittery light over oak tables and shelves that seemed to lean closer. I locked the door at 9:05 p.m., checking it thrice, and settled at the circulation desk, a mahogany slab with a rotary phone, logbook, brass bowl, earplugs, and matches. The logbook read, "Last librarian quit March 12, 25. No reason." My phone was dead, the stone walls a signal trap, so I waited, the library creaking like a ship caught in ice. At 10 p.m. I counted the reading rooms, 7, each crammed with dusty tomes and portraits of dour Mainers, their eyes glinting like they knew something I didn't. The east wing door, a heavy oak slab with iron bolts, stood at the hall's end, its handle tarnished and cold. I steered clear, my sneakers whispering on the parquet, and returned to the desk, doodling in the logbook to keep my eyes open. At 10:20 p.m., a faint tapping came from the east wing door, like nails scratching wood, slow and deliberate. The rule said ignore knocking, so I stayed put, my pulse thumping in my ears. The tapping stopped, but frost crept up the windows, spiderwebbing the glass despite the April air outside, the room chilling like a meat locker. At 10:45 p.m., a book fell in the stacks, its thud echoing like a gunshot. I crept over, flashlight shaking, and found a leather-bound volume open on the floor, its pages blank except for a single word scrawled in red ink. Clara, my name. I shoved it back on the shelf, my hands trembling, and hurried to the desk, the air thick with the smell of damp salt. At 11 p.m., the seaweed smell hit, briny, rotting, like a tide pool left to fester. I grabbed a paper from the desk, lit it in the brass bowl, the smoke coiling like a snake. The smell faded, but my heart didn't slow, the portrait's eyes seeming to follow me now. At 12:15 a.m., the phone rang, its shrill bell slicing the silence. I counted to the 5th ring, picked up, and said, "Cutler Library, closed till dawn." A woman's voice, soft and wet, like she was speaking underwater, said, "Open the door, Clara. I need a book." My name again. My skin crawled. The rule screaming, "Don't engage." I slammed the receiver down, checked the front door, locked tight, and peered into the fog-soaked lot. Nothing but a buoy's clang in the distance. The moon drowned in mist. At 1 a.m., I counted rooms. 7. But the air was colder, the lamps dimming like they were suffocating. The east wing door's bolts rattled, a faint clink like something testing them from the other side. I gripped the desk, my knuckles white, and waited, the sound fading after a tense minute. At 1:30 a.m., humming drifted from the stacks, a lullaby twisted by water, like a drowned choir. I jammed in the earplugs, their rubber bitter, and sat rigid, the humming clawing at the edges of my mind. It stopped after 15 minutes, but the silence was worse. The portrait's gazes heavier, like they were judging me. At 2:15 a.m., a shadow crossed the stained glass window, a woman's silhouette too tall, her edges blurring into the fog. I kept my eyes on the desk, the rule about windows burning in my brain, but the glass rattled, a low moan seeping through, like wind trapped in a cave. At 2:45 a.m., the phone rang again. "Cutler Library, closed till dawn," I said, my voice cracking. She whispered, "Clara, I'm so cold. Let me read." I hung up, my stomach twisting, the logbook's pages fluttering like something breathed on them. At 3 a.m., I counted rooms. 7, but the east wing door was ajar, a salty breeze leaking out, carrying whispers I couldn't make out. I slammed it shut, my hands burning on the handle, the metal searing like ice, and bolted to the desk, my breath shallow. At 3:30 a.m., a creak came from the ceiling, like footsteps pacing above, though the library had no second floor. The rule didn't cover this, so I froze, the sound circling, deliberate, like someone, or something, was searching. It stopped after 10 minutes, but the air felt heavier, the lamps flickering faster, casting shadows that didn't match the room. At 5:45 a.m., I checked the return chute, my hands shaking as I pulled out books, their covers damp and cold. One wasn't a book, a soggy pamphlet, its pages stuck together, ink running like tears, spelling Clara in jagged letters. I burned it in the courtyard furnace, the smoke black and thick, curling like it was alive. I left at 6 a.m., dawn gray and heavy, swearing I'd quit. But $22 an hour was my only lifeline, and Dad's debts were a chain I couldn't break. Sleep was a nightmare, my dreams choked with waves crashing over books, her voice singing my name through fog. I woke at noon, my wrist itching, a faint red mark where I'd touched the east wing door. At 7 p.m. I drove back, the library's sign flickering like a trap. Amos was leaving, his face pale under the fog's glow, his boots crunching gravel. "You're back," he said, voice low. "Check the logbook, lass. Watch shadows tonight and don't trust the mirrors." I nodded, my throat dry, and found a new note in spidery red ink. "If the east wing door opens, don't look inside. Close it fast." My gut nodded, but I clocked in, the rules looping in my head like a dirge. At 9:05 p.m., I locked the door, checked it thrice, and turned on the lamps, their buzz louder, like a swarm of flies. The burnt salt smell was thicker, stinging my nose, the air heavy with damp. At 10 p.m., I counted 7 rooms. but the east wing door was ajar, a faint sloshing sound echoing inside, like waves lapping stone. I slammed it shut, avoiding the gap, my hands stinging, the red mark on my wrist darkening into an anchor shape. At 10:30 p.m., a mirror in the main hall fogged up, though the room was warm, and a handprint appeared, fingers too long, smearing the glass. I looked away, my heart racing, Amos's warning about mirrors ringing in my ears. At 11 p.m., the seaweed smell returned, choking, like a rotting shore. I burned a paper in the brass bowl, the flames flaring blue, but the smell grew, now mixed with decay, like flesh left to the tide. At 12:10 a.m., the phone rang. "Cutler Library, closed till dawn," I said on the fifth ring. Her voice, dry as bone, said, "You left me, Clara. I'm still waiting." I hung up, checking the locks, the fog outside swirling like it had eyes. At 12:30 a.m., a book slid off a shelf in the stacks, landing open to a blank page with my name scrawled in wet ink, the letters dripping. I shoved it back, my hands slick, and retreated to the desk, the portrait's eyes glinting sharper now. At 1 a.m., I counted rooms, 8. A new room, its door unmarked, stood beside the east wing, its frame damp and warped. The rule said return to the desk, so I did, my breath shallow, the air colder, frost cracking the windows. At 1:45 a.m., the humming came again, louder, angrier, singing names. Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, like a roll call from a sunken ship. The earplugs didn't block it. The voices bled through, sharp as knives, each name a jab in my chest. At 2 a.m., a knock hit the front door, hard and urgent. A woman stood outside, her dress sodden, her face pale, eyes black voids swallowing the fog's glow. I checked her shadow. None. She knocked again, mouthing, "Clara, let me in. I need a book." I ducked behind the desk, my heart hammering, until she vanished, leaving a wet handprint on the glass, fingers impossibly long, webbed like fins. At 2:30 a.m., the stained glass windows glowed, shapes moving inside, hands pressing, faces twisting, eyes staring through the colored panes. I kept my eyes down, the rule about windows screaming, but their whispers filled the air, a chorus chanting my name, the glass vibrating like it would shatter. At 3 a.m., I counted 9 rooms, 2 new ones, their doors pulsing with faint blue light, like bioluminescence in deep water. The east wing door was open again, a woman's silhouette inside, her dress dripping black water, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I slammed it shut, but a cold hand grazed my wrist, burning like frostbite, the anchor scar throbbing. I stumbled back, and there she was, the woman in white standing in the main hall, her dress writhing like seaweed, her voice hissing, "You looked, Clara." I ran to the desk, the lamps flickering, plunging the library into strobes of light and shadow, her face flashing in every dark moment. At 3:20 a.m., the floor creaked, a low hum rising from below, like a ship groaning in the deep. The east wing door rattled, and the tapping returned, frantic, like claws scraping wood. I sprinkled ash from the brass bowl across the threshold, the seaweed smell choking, my eyes watering. At 3:45 a.m., a book appeared on the desk, leather-bound, its title inked in red, The Widow's Ledger. It opened itself, pages flipping to a list of names, Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, Clara, mine in fresh, wet ink, still spreading. The library shook, windows rattling, as black water seeped from the stacks, cold and salty, reaching my ankles. I climbed onto the desk, my sneakers slipping, the water lapping at my calves, tendrils curling like fingers. At 4 a.m., the ceiling groaned again, footsteps pacing faster, circling above, joined by a faint drip, like water leaking through stone. The portraits' faces shifted, their eyes bleeding black ink, their mouths opening in silent screams. I clutched the desk, the water at my knees, the hum growing louder, vibrating my bones. At 4:30 a.m., a mirror across the hall cracked, the glass splintering into a web, her face appearing in the shards, smiling, her teeth sharp like coral. I looked away, Amos's warning about mirrors echoing, but her laughter filled the room, low and wet, like waves breaking inside my skull. At 5 a.m., the phone rang again, the receiver buzzing before I touched it. Cutler Library, closed till dawn, I said, voice barely a whisper. You can't leave me, she hissed, her voice splitting into a dozen others, naming me, naming Dad, naming my cousin Ellie, lost at sea with him. I dropped the receiver, the line hissing static that formed words. Clara, come read. I didn't sleep, my wrist throbbing, the anchor scar red and swollen, my palms itching where I'd touched the ledger. Dreams drowned me in black water, her voice singing through fog, her hands pulling me under. I tried calling Eldridge to quit, but the line was dead, static whispering my name. My car stalled outside Cutler, the engine choking like it was flooded. At 7 p.m., I walked to the library, the fog thick, whispering my name like a lullaby. Amos was gone, but the logbook had a new note in his shaky hand. The widow wants you. Find her ledger. Burn it. Don't look at her. Under the desk, I found a tin of matches labeled for her, the metal cold as ice. At 9:05 p.m., I locked the door, the lamps buzzing like a storm, the burnt salt smell suffocating, like a fire drowned at sea. At 10 p.m., I counted 10 rooms, 3 new ones, their doors dripping black water, the wood swollen and soft. The east wing door was wide open, waves crashing inside, like an ocean trapped in stone, a faint blue glow pulsing from within. I slammed it shut, my wrist burning, the anchor scar pulsing like a heartbeat, my palms blistered from the handle. At 10:30 p.m., the mirrors in the main hall fogged, handprints smearing across them, fingers webbed, leaving trails of salt. I avoided their reflections, my breath fogging the air, the room colder than the cliff outside. At 11 p.m., the seaweed smell hit, thicker, like a rotting shipwreck hauled ashore. I burned a paper, the flames dying fast, the smoke black and oily, the smell growing, now laced with blood, coppery and sharp. At 11:40 p.m., the phone rang. Cutler Library closed till dawn, I said, voice cracking. She laughed, a wet rasp. You can't hide, Clara. I'm bound to you. I hung up, the receiver slipping, the line hissing like surf. At 12:15 a.m., frost coated the windows, cracking the glass into jagged webs, the fog outside swirling into shapes, faces, hands, eyes watching. The humming filled the library, chanting names, Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail, Clara, mine louder, sharper, like a hook in my chest. The earplugs were useless. The voices were in my skull, clawing my thoughts. At 1 a.m., I counted 11 rooms, 4 new ones, their walls slick with seawater, handprints pulsing like they breathed. The ledger was open on the desk, my name glowing red, ink spilling over the edges, dripping onto the floor. I burned another paper, but the flames flared green, then died, the seaweed smell drowning me, my lungs burning. At 1:30 a.m., the east wing door burst open, black water flooding out, knee-deep, cold as death, wrapping my legs like ropes. A girl's voice called from inside, "Clara, help me!" It was Ellie, my cousin, her voice clear as the summers we'd hunted shells on Bangor's shores, before she vanished with Dad. The rule said, "Don't look, don't touch." I slammed the door, ash falling from my shaking hands, but she sobbed, her voice fading into the waves. "Don't leave me, Clara." At 2 a.m., the woman appeared, her dress a mass of seaweed, her face inches from mine, her breath black and briny, eyes wet voids. "You broke the rules," she hissed, her voice a chorus of drowned screams echoing in my bones. The stained glass windows blazed, showing a shipwreck, figures sinking, her face in every wave, her hands reaching through the glass. I looked away, but she was in every reflection. Mirrors, book covers, the brass bowl, even the logbook's glossy pages. The library groaned, walls splitting, water at my thighs, pulling me down like a riptide. At 2:30 a.m., the sign outside exploded, glass raining into the lot, the letters twisting to "Eternal is knowledge," glowing red, bleeding into the fog. The ledger levitated, pages shredding, its hum a scream that shook my teeth. At 3 a.m., books floated from the stacks, their pages open, faces trapped inside, screaming, their eyes black, their mouths locked on my name. Clara, Clara, Clara. The water hit my waist, thick with salt and ink, tendrils coiling around me. I waded to the desk, my jeans heavy, the hum from below rattling the floor, the portraits' faces melting, ink running like blood. At 3:15 a.m., a gurgle came from the stacks, like lungs choking on seawater. I fought through the water, chest high, and saw books bobbing, their pages showing shipwrecks, drownings, her face in every illustration, smiling. They whispered my name, their voices blending with hers, a cacophony that shook the walls. I reached the desk, but the gurgle followed, the ceiling dripping black water, the lamps flickering like dying stars. At 3:30 a.m., a man appeared at the front door, his face gaunt, clothes soaked, eyes black voids. No shadow. "Clara, I need a book," he said, his voice like waves breaking on bone. I stayed put, the water at my chest, handprints smearing the windows, dripping salt, too many to count. At 3:45 a.m., the mirrors shattered, glass raining across the floor, her face in every shard, her laughter wet and sharp, cutting through the hum. The ledger glowed brighter, its pages burning without flame, my name pulsing like a beacon. The footsteps above returned, heavier, dragging chains, joined by a low chant, like a crew singing a shanty, their voices warped by the deep. At 4 a.m., the phone rang, the receiver lifting itself, glowing faintly blue. "Cutler Library, closed till dawn," I said, voice gone. "You're mine!" she screamed, her voice splitting, naming Dad, Ellie, me, 100 others, the water surging to my shoulders, pulling me under. At 4 a.m., Amos waded into the library, his boots sloshing, his face grim, a sea-soaked journal in his hands. "You saw the widow," he said, voice steady despite the flood. "She's the captain's wife, drowned in 1876, betrayed by her husband for her dowry's gold. Her ledger binds her here, claiming souls for her crew." He tossed me the journal, its pages heavy, the leather warm. "Burn it, lass," the widow screamed, her form towering, her hands wrapping Amos, her dress a writhing mass of seaweed and bone. I lit the matches, the journal catching fire, flames roaring blue, her scream shattering the remaining windows, glass exploding outward, water surging to my neck. At 4:30 a.m., Eldridge appeared, wading through the flood, her face skeletal, eyes like pits. "My family bound her here," she said, holding another ledger, identical, its cover pulsing red. "We fed her souls to keep her dormant. You woke her, girl." She tossed it to me, the leather searing my blistered palms. "Burn it. End the bargain." The widow lunged, her hands clawing Eldridge, dissolving her into salt and foam, her scream fading into the waves. I burned the ledger, its pages shrieking, the flames green and wild, the water turning to sand, swallowing the stacks, the desks, the lamps, the portraits. The library groaned, walls buckling, the ceiling collapsing, as I fought through the sand, my legs sinking, stumbling into the lot as the building sank into the cliff, a whirlpool of sand, salt, and fog roaring into the earth. Dawn broke, the sky bruised purple, the air thick with salt and ash. My wrist bore an anchor scar, raw and throbbing, my palms burned, the skin peeling like old paper. I drove to a diner in Machias, my hands shaking on the wheel, the Corolla's engine coughing like it was drowning. Amos was there, alive, his face carved with grief, sliding into the booth. "You burned it," he said, voice low, handing me a sage bundle tied with red cord. "She's gone, but Maine's waters don't forget, lass. Burn this when she calls." He left, the bundle heavy, smelling faintly of the sea. I moved to Augusta, got a clerk job at a bookstore, but the scar aches in fog, a sharp pain like teeth. Dreams trap me in libraries of black water, books floating, her black eyes watching, her hands reaching. Last month I found a leather book in my bag, red ink inside, my name scrawled beside Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail. I burned it in my sink, the smoke choking me, but it was on my shelf the next day, open to my name, the ink still wet. I've seen her 4 times since, in a bookstore mirror at 3 a.m., her fingers brushing my reflection. In a dream, standing on Cutler's Cliff, her dress dripping. In a Portland fog, her silhouette singing my name. Last week, in a Bangor bookstore, her face in a book's reflection, smiling, her teeth sharp. I keep a journal, locked in a safe, filled with names I hear in whispers. Eleanor, Thomas, Abigail. Voices in fog, in waves, in the hum of fluorescent lights. I tried leaving Maine, but my car died on Route 1, the dashboard flashing "Knowledge is eternal," red and pulsing. I turned back, the book in my bag humming, heavier than stone. The rules never stop. The widow's out there reading Sins in the Sea, and I'm still her librarian, bound by salt and scars, forever.